There is a small body in an upstairs room and a blanket pulled over a face that was warm this morning. The house belongs to a widow. She is not a Hebrew. She lives in a foreign town on the coast in a place where her own neighbors worship a different god, and until a few weeks ago, she was preparing to eat her last meal and die of the famine. Then a strange prophet showed up at her gate, and her flour did not run out, and her oil did not fail, and for a little while it seemed like the worst was behind her. Then her son got sick, and the sickness got worse, and one afternoon the breathing simply stopped. Now she is standing in her own doorway, and she is doing the thing every grieving person does when they cannot understand the loss. She is looking for someone to blame. She turns on the prophet. She says in so many words, "What did I ever do to you? Did you come into my house just to remind God of my sins and take my boy?" And the prophet, a man named Elijah, does not argue with her. He just says 4 words, "Give me your son." He carries the dead child up the stairs to the room where he has been staying. He lays the boy on his own bed, and then he does something that no priest in that age would have taught him to do. He does not stand at a respectful distance and recite a prayer. He climbs onto the bed, and he stretches his own body out over the body of the child, face to face, hands to hands, and he cries out to God. Once, nothing. Again, nothing. A third time, and the breath comes back. This is the first time in the whole Bible that someone who was dead is alive again. The very first. And here is what almost nobody tells you about this account, and about everyone like it that comes after. Every single person you're about to meet the widow's boy in that upstairs room, a little girl held by the hand, a man called out of a sealed tomb, all of them, every one of them died again. Hold on to that. It is going to matter more than you think, because this is not a list of magic tricks. This is not a string of happy endings stacked on top of each other. And this is not 9 versions of the same miracle wearing different names. Read closely in the order it actually happened, and these accounts are doing something far stranger. They are building. Each one pushes a little further than the last. The method changes. The authority changes. The distance between the one who speaks and the one who answers gets shorter and shorter, until at the very end there is no one left to do the raising at all, because the one in the grave gets up on his own. That is where we are going. Stay with me, because the path there is full of details you have read past your whole life. We are going to walk through every recorded time in Scripture that the dead came back to life, in order, starting in the days of the old prophets when raising the dead meant a man throwing himself across a corpse and begging heaven for one more breath, moving through the strangest one of all, a raising where the prophet doing it was already dead himself, then into the Gospels where everything about how it happens quietly transforms, and finally to the one grave in human history that was supposed to stay open, and didn't. But it starts here, in a borrowed room in a foreign town with a mother who has already given up, and a prophet lying face down on a child refusing to. Because before any of the famous ones, there was a boy nobody remembers by name. And he was the first. Years pass. Elijah is gone, carried off in a whirlwind, but that belongs to another day, and his work falls to a younger man named Elisha. If you want to understand how God's power moves through a generation, watch what happens next. Because the second raising in the Bible looks almost exactly like the first. Almost. There is a wealthy woman in a town called Shunem. She has no children, and in that world for a woman that was a particular kind of grief, a silence at the dinner table that everyone notices and no one mentions. She shows kindness to Elisha. She and her husband build a small room on their roof just for him, with a bed and a table and a lamp, so the prophet has a place to rest when he passes through. And Elisha, wanting to repay her, tells her she will hold a son in her arms within the year. She does. A boy. And for a few years, the silence at her table is gone. Then one morning the child is out in the fields with his father, and he grabs his own head and cries out, "My head, My head. A servant carries him home. He sits on his mother's lap until noon, and at noon he dies. Here is what she does, and pay attention, because it tells you everything about her. She does not fall apart. She lays the dead boy on the prophet's bed in the prophet's room, shuts the door, and rides out to find Elisha herself. When his servant asks if everything is all right, she says one word, "Shalom." It is well. She will not even speak the death out loud until she is standing in front of the only man she believes can undo it. And Elisha comes. He goes into that little roof room, and he shuts the door, and he does the same strange thing his master did a generation before. He stretches himself out over the body, mouth to mouth, eyes to eyes, hands to hands. The flesh of the child begins to warm. He gets up, paces, the room climbs back onto the boy a second time, and the child sneezes 7 times and opens his eyes. The Greek translators of the Hebrew Scriptures used a word for this kind of waking that the New Testament will use again and again. Egero. It means to rouse, to wake someone from sleep. Not to reassemble a corpse. To wake a sleeper. Hold that word. It is going to come back when we reach the Gospels, and it is going to mean something far larger than it does right now. So now you have seen it twice. And the pattern is clear. A holy man. A dead child. The prophet lowers his own living body onto the dead one, as if life could be poured from skin to skin, and he begs and he waits, and God answers. It is intimate. It is desperate. It costs the prophet something he has to get down in the dust and the death and press himself against it. Remember that pattern, because the moment we cross into the Gospels, it is going to be shattered completely. The man who comes next will not lie down on anyone. He will not strain or pace or cry out 3 times and wait. He will walk up to death and speak to it like it works for him, and it will obey on the first word. But before we get there, before the method changes forever, there is one more account from the age of the prophets. And it is without question the strangest raising in the entire Bible. No prophet stretches over anyone in this one. In fact, the prophet whose power does the raising has been dead and buried for a long, long time. Stay with me, because this next one almost nobody preaches. And once you see it, you will understand something about all of this that changes how the rest of the list reads. It happens fast in a single verse, almost like the writer is in a hurry to move on. But slow down here, because there is nothing else like it anywhere in Scripture. Elisha is dead. He has been dead long enough to be bones in a tomb. The great prophet who once stretched himself over a dying boy is now himself just a body in the ground. And one day, a burial is happening nearby. A man has died, and his friends are carrying him out to bury him when they see something on the horizon that turns their blood cold. A raiding party. Moabites. Armed men coming fast. There is no time for a proper burial now, no time for ceremony, no time to even finish what they started. So they do the only thing they can. They throw the dead man into the nearest open tomb and run for their lives. And the nearest open tomb is Elisha's. The body drops down into the dark and lands against the old prophet's bones. And the very moment that dead man touches what is left of Elisha life, slams back into him. He stands up. A corpse thrown into a grave to hide from raiders gets to his feet inside the tomb of a man who has been dead for years. Now, stop and think about what this does to the pattern. In the first 2 accounts, you could almost tell yourself a comfortable lie. You could say the power was in the prophet, in his holiness, in his faith, in the way he pressed his living body against the dead one and prayed. The man does something, and God responds to the man. But here, there is no living prophet. There is no prayer. There is no faith. The dead man being lowered did not even ask for this. He was being hidden, not healed. There is nothing here but bones and accident, and life comes anyway, which means the power was never in Elisha. Not really. It was only ever moving through him. The prophets were not the source. They were the place where the source happened to be standing at the time. And once you see that, once you understand that the life was never coming from the man you are ready for, what happens when the source himself walks onto the page? So let us cross over. From the dusty age of the prophets, where raising the dead was rare and strange and cost a man everything, into a stretch of about 3 years in a small Roman province, where it is about to start happening in broad daylight in front of crowds with nothing but a sentence. There is a town called Nain. A funeral is coming out through the town gate, and in that culture, a funeral was loud, a procession of mourners and hired wailers, the whole village walking the dead out to the grave. On the bier is a young man, and walking behind him is a woman the writer wants you to see clearly. She is a widow, and he was her only son. Sit with what that means. Her husband is already gone. Now her only child is gone. In that world, she has just lost not only the 2 people she loved most, but her entire future. No man to provide. No son to protect her. Nothing ahead but poverty and dependence, and a long, slow disappearing. She is in every sense that mattered then finished. And a teacher coming the other way stops the entire procession. He does not climb onto the body. He does not lie down mouth to mouth, eyes to eyes. He does not pray 3 times and wait to see if it works. He looks at the mother. His heart broke for her, and he says gently, "Do not weep." Then he walks up and touches the open coffin, and the men carrying it freeze in their tracks. And he says one sentence, "Young man, I say to you, get up." That word "get up" is egeiro, the same word from the roof in Shunem. Wake up. As if death were nothing more than a deep sleep. And this man simply needed to be told the morning had come. And the dead man sits up and begins to speak. No straining, no 3 attempts, no body pressed against body. Just a voice and an instant. The whole desperate, intimate, costly method of the prophets is gone, replaced by a man who talks to the dead the way you would wake a child for school. And we are only getting started. Because the next time he does this, he says it in a language so tender, so ordinary, that the gospel writer refused to translate it and left his exact words on the page for us to hear. His name is Jairus, and he is not a beggar. He is a ruler of the synagogue. A man of standing a man other men stand up for when he enters a room. And he comes and falls down at the feet of a traveling teacher in front of everyone, because his little girl is dying. She is 12 years old, his only daughter, and status means nothing now. He would crawl through the street if it would buy her 1 more hour. Jesus agrees to come. But on the way, the crowd presses in, and there is a delay, another miracle, a sick woman unfolding in the middle of this one. And you can feel the father's panic in it. Every minute standing still is a minute his daughter does not have. And then the worst thing arrives. Messengers from the house, their faces already telling the story before they speak. Your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher anymore. There it is. The sentence every parent rehearses in their nightmares. Too late. You were too late. And Jesus turns to this shattered father and says something almost unreasonable. Do not be afraid. Only believe. They get to the house, and it is already full of the noise of grief, the wailing, the mourners, the machinery of a funeral cranking into motion. And he says something that makes them laugh at him. The child is not dead. She is only sleeping. They laugh because they know a dead body when they see one. But you already know what that word means by now. You have watched it twice. Sleep is not Jesus being gentle or vague. Sleep is exactly precisely what death is to him, a condition you wake up from. He clears the room. He takes the dead girl by the hand. And here, the gospel writer does something he almost never does. He freezes the moment and gives us the exact words in the exact language Jesus spoke them that day in that room. 2 Aramaic words, Talitha kumi. It means, little girl, get up, but it is softer than that. More intimate, the kind of thing a parent murmurs at the edge of a bed in the gray light of morning. Time to get up, little one. The everyday phrase a mother uses to wake a sleeping child. That is what he says to a corpse. And her spirit returns, and she stands up, and she walks, and then, this is the detail that undoes me. He tells them to give her something to eat, because she is 12, and she is going to be hungry. And the God who just defeated death is also thinking about her breakfast. If you have made it this far, you already know you are not here for the highlight reel. You want the whole pattern, every link in the chain in order. And there is one link left in the Gospels that towers over all the rest. So let me ask one small thing before we get to it. If this is the kind of thing you want to understand, all the way down the channel exists for exactly that. Stay with me to the end. The last one changes everything, because now we come to Bethany, and to a man named Lazarus. By the time Jesus arrives, Lazarus has been in the tomb 4 days, and that number is not decoration. It matters. There was a belief in that culture that the soul lingered near the body for 3 days, and that after the 3rd day, when the body began to corrupt, all hope was finally and absolutely gone. 4 days was not barely dead. 4 days was the point past which nobody ever came back. 4 days was a sealed door. And Lazarus has 2 sisters, Martha and Mary, and each of them says the same thing to Jesus when he comes the same sentence, carrying all the weight of their disappointment in it. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Where were you? We sent word. You stayed away. And here at the grave of his friend, the shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept. The one who has already raised 2 people, who knows exactly what he is about to do, who knows this ends in joy, still stands at that tomb and breaks down and cries. He is not crying because the situation is hopeless. He is crying because death is an obscenity, and he hates it, and standing in front of it moves him even when he is about to undo it. Then he says out loud in front of a crowd of skeptics and mourners, Lazarus, come forth. And a dead man, 4 days gone, walks out of a sealed tomb, still wrapped head to foot in his grave clothes, and Jesus says, loose him and let him go. That is the high watermark of everything before the end. Not a child, not the recently dead. A grown man, 4 days in the grave past the line everyone agreed was final, called out by name into the daylight. And yet, even Lazarus, and this is the thing I told you to hold on to at the very beginning, even Lazarus is going to die again. That tomb he walked out of. One day he walks back in. For good. Every name so far. Remember that. Stay with me, because we are about to meet the only one for whom it was not true. But first, because we are going in order, and the order matters, the account does something you might not expect. The teacher who spoke to corpses like they worked for him goes to a cross, and he dies. The source of the life himself, dead on a Roman execution post with the sky going dark over Jerusalem. And at the exact moment he dies, the Gospel of Matthew records something so strange that many people read right past it. The ground shakes, rocks split, tombs around the city break open, and the bodies of many holy people who had died are raised to life. And later, after his own resurrection, they walk into Jerusalem and are seen by many. Now I will be honest with you, the way a good guide should. This passage is debated. It is only a few verses only in Matthew, and faithful readers have argued for centuries about exactly what happened and when. I am not going to pretend the questions away. But I am also not going to skip it because it belongs in the order, and because of where it sits. These graves do not open after a prophet stretches over them. They do not open because someone prays. They tear open at the instant one specific man stops breathing. Death itself flinches at his death. Hold that image. We are almost home, because the pattern does not stop with him. It gets handed down. Go forward a little into the years after, into a seaside town called Joppa. There is a woman there named Tabitha, in Greek Dorcas, and she is loved the way few people are loved. She spends her life making clothes for widows for the poor, sewing with her own hands for people who have no one. And she gets sick, and she dies. And the room fills with widows holding up the coats and garments she made them weeping, because the person who saw them when no one else did is gone. They send for Peter. And Peter the fisherman, the one who once denied he ever knew Jesus, comes into that room, and he sends everyone out, and he kneels down. And then he says 2 words that should make the hair on your arm stand up if you have been paying attention. Tabitha, arise. Do you hear it, Talitha cumi? Tabitha, arise. Peter is standing in a dead woman's room doing exactly what he watched his master do in the house of Jairus. He is not inventing anything. He is echoing. The power that moved through prophets and then through the Son is now moving through ordinary men who simply remember what they saw. And Tabitha opens her eyes and sits up, and Peter takes her by the hand and lifts her to her feet. It happens once more. A young man named Eutychus in a town called Troas, sitting in a 3rd-floor window late at night while the Apostle Paul preaches on and on past midnight. And the boy does what any of us would do. He falls asleep. Then he falls 3 stories down, and he is picked up dead. And Paul goes down and throws himself onto the young man and wraps him in his arms. And there it is again. Did you catch it? Paul stretches his body over the boy. The oldest method of all the way of Elijah and Elisha, reaching all the way back across 1,000 years into the hands of an apostle. Every era of it folded into one rescue on a stairwell in the dark. And the boy's life returns, and they take him home alive, and Luke tells us the people were not a little comforted. So now you have seen all of them. The widow's son, the Shunammite boy, the man and the bones, the young man at 9, Jairus' little girl, Lazarus, the saints at the cross, Tabitha, Eutychus. 9 times across more than 1,000 years the dead came back. And every single one of them died again. This is the thing I asked you to hold on to in the very first minute, and now it is time to feel the full weight of it. The widow's boy grew up, grew old, and was buried. The Shunammite child died. Jairus' daughter died. Tabitha died. Eutychus died. Lazarus. 4 days in the tomb, called out by name. In front of a crowd, Lazarus walked back into a grave, one final day, and did not come out. Every raising in this entire list was a delay, a reprieve, a loved one handed back across the threshold for a few more years, and then eventually taken again. This is not resuscitation made permanent. This is not a longer life. This is not death postponed. Every miracle you have just witnessed was a stay of execution, not a pardon. The sentence still came due. For all of them. For all of them but one. Because there is one tomb left. And it sits outside Jerusalem sealed with a stone and a Roman guard holding the body of the man who started every chain reaction we have followed. The one who touched the coffin at 9. Who spoke to a 12-year-old in her own bed. Who wept and then shouted into the dark of Bethany. He is the dead one now, and there is no prophet left to stretch over him, no apostle to kneel beside him, no one to say arise. For the first time in this entire account, there is no one on the outside who can do the raising. So he does it himself. There is a Greek word the whole New Testament reaches for when it talks about this. Anastasis, a standing up again. And on the 3rd day, with no hand on him and no voice over him, the dead man inside that tomb stands up on his own and folds the cloth that had covered his face and walks out into a garden at dawn. And he never went back in. That is the difference. That is the whole reason for putting them in order. Everyone before him was raised by someone, and everyone before him died again. He raised himself. And death never got him a second time. And this is not a faith claim floating free of history. An early Christian writer named Quadratus, writing within living memory of these events around the year 125, made a striking argument to a Roman emperor. He said the people Jesus had healed and raised were not rumors. Some of them, he wrote, had survived all the way into his own lifetime. You could still meet them. The claim was being made not in the safety of legend, but while the witnesses were still standing there to be questioned. Think of the most human version of this, you know. You have waited at some point on news of someone you love. In a corridor. By a phone. In the worst hours of the night, and there are only ever two endings to that wait. The first is the one we beg for. They pulled through. They are going to be okay. And it is real. And it is a mercy. And we are right to weep with relief. But we all know, somewhere underneath, that it is the temporary kind. That they pulled through only means not today. That the corridor is waiting for us again somewhere further down the line. Every single raising in this list was the first kind of ending. They pulled through for now. There has only ever been one of the second kind. One time the answer was not today, but never again. One grave that was meant to stay open the way every grave before it had and refused. So let me leave you with 3 things to carry out of this. The first is simple, and it is the fact that holds the whole list together. Every raising in the Bible before the empty tomb was temporary. Elijah's boy, Elisha's boy, the man among the bones, the son at Nain Jairus' daughter, Lazarus, Tabitha Eutychus. Every one of them was a door opened for a little while and then shut again. They were real. They were mercies. But they were reprieves, not rescues. The grave gave them back, and then in time, the grave collected. The second is closer to home, and you already know it because you have lived it. You know the first kind of comeback. You have felt that flood of relief when the news was good, when the fever broke, when the surgery worked, when the person you could not bear to lose got to stay a little longer. That joy is real, and you should never apologize for it. But some quiet part of you has always known what it was. The temporary kind. The not today kind. We spend our whole lives grateful for stays of execution and pretending they are pardons. And the third. Here is the one I want to leave ringing. There has been exactly one grave in the history of the world that was supposed to stay open and didn't. Every tomb before it followed the rule. You go in, and if by some miracle you come out, you go back in eventually. Every single one obeyed that law, except one. One man walked out at dawn and never walked back, and in doing it, he did not just break the pattern. He broke the rule the pattern was built on. He went first so the door he left open would stay open. And that is the only one of these stories that has anything to say about your grave. The others are wonders. This one is a promise. The widow's son got a few more years. You were offered something else. So let me ask you before you go. Of all 9 of these, the bones. The breakfast for a 12-year-old, a man, 4 days gone. An apostle echoing 2 words he once heard in a stranger's house. Which one had you never realized was actually in the Bible? Tell me in the comments. I read them. And if this is the kind of thing you want the whole pattern in order all the way down with nothing skipped and nothing dumbed down, then you already belong here. Stay. 9 times the dead came back. 9 times the grave gave someone up. And 9 times, eventually, it took them again. 1 time it didn't.